Hi, lovely people. Good night, good night, good night. Let's listen to this. Very interesting, okay?
There are other presidential qualifications in the Constitution.
Amendment case, 14th Amendment
case. There's a separate amendment, the 22nd Amendment, that doesn't permit anyone to run for a second term. We have a history of states disqualifying, not all, but some, of disqualifying candidates who won't be of age if elected. We have a history of at least one state disqualifying someone who wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Right.
Are your arguments limited to Section 3?
Not quite. The question, Justice Sotomayor, is whether the state is violating term limits by adding to or altering the extant qualifications for the presidency in the Constitution. Now,
so you want us to say, I'm wondering why the term limits qualification is important to you.
Because
are you setting up so that if some president runs for a third term, that a state can't disqualify him from the ballot?
Of course a state can disqualify him from the ballot, because that is a qualification that is categorical. It's not defeasible by Congress. So a state is enforcing the Constitution when it says you can't appear on our ballot if you've already served 2 terms as president.
The same if they're underage when elected, and the same if they're not a U.S. citizen.
The same if they're not, well, the same if they're not a U.S. citizen for sure. The age is a little more nuanced, because you can imagine a scenario where the person is 34 years old at the time of the election, but he turns 35 before inauguration.
Well, then that would probably come up to us at some point. The state would make a decision and say he's ineligible, and we would have to decide that question then. But my point is, so what, adding qualifications to what term limit is your argument based on?
You're
I'm just
changing.
confused.
Okay, with respect to maybe I'll start with the age example. If a state like Colorado says you can't appear on our presidential ballot unless you are 35 years old on the day of the election, that would be a violation of term limits, because there could be a 34-year-old on the day of the election who turns 35 before inauguration day. What Colorado has done here, what their Supreme Court has done, is similar, because under Section 3, President Trump needs to qualify during the time that he would hold office. And the Colorado Supreme Court is saying to President Trump, you have to show that you would qualify under Section 3 now, at the time of the election, or at the time that we, the state Supreme Court.
So what, I just point of clarification, so we're all on the same page. When you say term limits, you mean our decision in the term limits case?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Constitutional provision governing term limits.
Yes, U.S. term limits against Thornton. Maybe I should call it Thornton instead of term limits. I'm sorry.
Does it have something to do with the fact that the particular circumstance that you're talking about can change? Is that what you mean? I'm trying to understand the distinction between the provision in the Constitution that relates to disqualification on the basis of insurrection behavior and these other provisions that Justice Sotomayor points out. They all seem to me to be extant constitutional requirements. So, but you're drawing a distinction.
Right, I'm drawing a distinction because some of them are categorical.
What do you mean by categorical? Whether or not you are an insurrectionist is or is not categorical?
It is not categorical because Congress can lift the disability by a 2/3 vote. And
but why does that change the initial determination of whether or not you fall into the category? I don't understand the fact that you can be excused from having been in the category. Why does that not make it a categorical determination?
Because we don't know whether President Trump will be excused before he's sworn in, if he wins the election, on January 20th, 2025. And a court that is saying that President Trump has to show now, today, that he would qualify under Section 3 is accelerating the deadline that the Constitution provides for him to obtain a waiver from Congress.
But that's by virtue of the hold, right? Hold office. This is
correct. Section 3 bans him only from holding office.
Can I ask you, now that I have the floor,
yes.
Can I ask you to address your first argument, which is the officer point? Oh, sorry.
Why don't we, can we, is that okay if we do this and then we go?
Sure.
You know, will there be an opportunity to do officer stuff, or should we?
Absolutely.
I just want to understand, so on this theory, what is the sum total of ways that that Section 3 can be enforced. That somebody out there can say, yes, there's been a former president who engaged or led or participated in an insurrection, and so should be disqualified from office, putting aside the officer argument.
Right.
What is the sum total of ways that enforcement can happen?
So the answer to that question is going to depend on what Your Honor thinks of Griffin's case. So if this court were to affirm the rationale of Griffin's case, then the